In today's video, we uncover the fascinating story of Zoroaster, a prophet whose teachings changed the course of history. Born in ancient Persia, Zoroaster introduced ideas that would lay the foundation for one of the world's first monotheistic religions, ideas that would ripple through time, influencing some of the major religions we know today. But despite his monumental impact, he is often forgotten by history. We'll take a deep dive into Zoroaster's life, explore his revolutionary beliefs, and examine how his philosophy not only shaped the ancient world, but also left an indelible mark on the future of religion and ethical thought. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, give us a like, and hit the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive. Ready? Let's begin the journey into the life of this forgotten prophet. We begin our exploration of Zoroaster's life by setting the stage in the ancient world, where his ideas would come to challenge and eventually reshape the spiritual landscape of Persia. At the time, Persia was a land rich in diverse religious beliefs, and the region was home to a variety of gods, mythologies, and cults. These polytheistic traditions permeated everyday life, influencing everything from royal politics to social practices. The gods of Persia were seen as powerful, often capricious beings who influenced the fate of individuals, kingdoms, and entire nations. Ancient Persia, located in what is today modern-day Iran, was at the crossroads of several ancient civilizations, including Mesopotamia, India, and the Near East. It was a region that had seen its fair share of religious experimentation and conflict. In the centuries before Zoroaster's birth, the Persian region was home to a vast pantheon of deities. The Medes, who ruled over much of the region, practiced a religion that honored a wide range of gods, each with their own spheres of influence. Alongside this, there were also Zoroastrian precursors, earlier forms of what would later evolve into Zoroaster's teachings. In a sense, the religious landscape was both chaotic and rich, with potential for change. Zoroaster's exact birth date is a matter of debate among scholars. Some sources claim that he was born around 1500 BCE, while others suggest a later date, placing his birth somewhere in the 7th to 6th century BCE. There is even some evidence to suggest that Zoroaster may have lived much earlier, possibly even as far back as 1700 BCE, though this remains highly speculative. The lack of clear historical records leaves his birth shrouded in mystery, and scholars continue to argue over the specifics. One reason for this uncertainty is the lack of definitive archaeological evidence directly connected to Zoroaster himself. Unlike other historical figures, Zoroaster did not leave behind a tomb or monumental inscriptions, and the details of his early life are largely derived from religious texts and later traditions. What is clear, however, is that Zoroaster was born into a world dominated by the beliefs of his time, a world where polytheism reigned and where the gods were believed to wield direct control over human affairs. In this setting, Zoroaster's message would prove to be revolutionary. Zoroaster's early life is said to have been marked by a deep sense of dissatisfaction with the state of the world around him. According to many ancient accounts, Zoroaster was born into a priestly family, and as a young man he was initially involved in the religious rituals of his community. However, as he grew older, he became increasingly disillusioned with the traditional practices of his society. The gods of the time, he believed, were not the answer to humanity's suffering. Rather than being a source of divine justice and order, the gods were often seen as remote and indifferent to the plight of mankind. It was at this point that Zoroaster's spiritual journey began. At the age of 30, Zoroaster is said to have undergone a profound spiritual awakening. After years of meditation and reflection, he claimed to have received a divine revelation from Ahura Mazda, the supreme god, in his later teachings. In this vision, Zoroaster came into direct contact with Ahura Mazda, who revealed the true nature of the universe to him. The revelation was a pivotal moment in Zoroaster's life, marking the beginning of his mission to spread the idea of one supreme God who would govern the cosmos with justice and wisdom. This vision led to the creation of what would become the central tenet of Zoroastrianism, the belief in Ahura Mazda as the one true God. Zoroaster's teachings were not merely a rejection of the multitude of gods worshipped by his contemporaries. They were an invitation to follow a higher, singular divine force that transcended the petty rivalries and conflict among the gods of the ancient world. Ahura Mazda, in Zoroaster's vision, represented the embodiment of truth, order, and goodness. He was the god who would guide humanity towards righteousness and away from the forces of chaos and evil, embodied by the evil spirit Angra Mainyu. Zoroaster's monotheistic vision was radical in the context of the ancient world. To suggest that there was only one God, ruling over all of creation, was a bold statement that ran contrary to the religious practices of the time. It was not simply a matter of shifting allegiances between gods. Zoroaster sought to eradicate the very idea of polytheism and replace it with a cosmic dualism in which the forces of good and evil would constantly struggle for supremacy. The importance of Zoroaster's teachings cannot be overstated. His message would have been radical for many of his contemporaries, but it also found fertile ground in the region of Persia, a land steeped in ancient spiritual traditions. While polytheism dominated the religious landscape, the idea of a supreme god was not entirely unfamiliar to the Persian people. In fact, there were pre-existing religious ideas that had some similarities to Zoroaster's teachings. The ancient Persian kings, for example, believed in the divine mandate to rule, with some rulers claiming that their authority came directly from the gods. Zoroaster's challenge was to elevate the concept of a singular, all-powerful god, Ahura Mazda, above the many regional deities, emphasizing the importance of divine justice and moral order. In addition to the religious environment of Persia, the broader context of the ancient world also played a role in shaping Zoroaster's ideas. Persia's location at the crossroads of several ancient civilizations meant that Zoroaster's teachings were inevitably influenced by the religious and philosophical ideas of neighboring cultures. From the more pantheistic beliefs of India to the monotheistic elements of Judaism in the Near East, Zoroaster's ideas were informed by the rich tapestry of thought that existed in the ancient world. However, it was the blending of these influences with his own unique insights that allowed Zoroaster to forge a distinctive religious philosophy. The ancient world, and particularly Persia, was a place where the very concept of God and divine intervention was constantly evolving. Zoroaster's message would go on to shape not only the course of Persian history, but also influence the development of many other religious traditions. But the path was not easy, and Zoroaster's ideas would face significant opposition before they could take root. Zoroaster's early life as a young man was filled with introspection and a profound search for truth. In an age where Persia was deeply entrenched in polytheism and religious pluralism, Zoroaster felt a growing disillusionment with the traditional gods worshipped by his society. These gods, many of whom were seen as capricious and distant, failed to provide answers to the suffering and disorder he witnessed in the world. From his early years, Zoroaster sensed that there must be something deeper, a truth beyond the fragmented religious systems of his time. At the age of 30, after years of intense meditation, contemplation, and inner struggle, Zoroaster's quest for spiritual understanding reached a pivotal moment. It was during this period of seclusion and reflection that Zoroaster experienced what would become the defining moment of his life, a divine revelation from Ahura Mazda, the supreme god in Zoroastrianism. According to tradition, Zoroaster was visited by a heavenly figure, a manifestation of Ahura Mazda himself, who revealed the secrets of the universe to the young prophet. This moment marked the beginning of Zoroaster's mission to share the wisdom he had received with the world. The revelation was not just a spiritual experience, it was a radical transformation in how Zoroaster viewed the world and the divine. Ahura Mazda, in Zoroaster's vision, was the one true God, the creator of all things, and the embodiment of truth, wisdom, and goodness. This was a striking departure from the polytheistic worldview of the time, where gods were often seen as rivals to one another, each vying for the loyalty and sacrifice of humanity. In Zoroaster's new vision, the divine was unified, singular, and all-encompassing. Ahura Mazda's teachings to Zoroaster were simple yet profound. At the heart of Zoroaster's revelation was the idea that the universe is governed by an eternal struggle between good and evil, truth and falsehood, order and chaos. This cosmic battle was not fought by multiple gods, but rather by two opposing forces, Ahura Mazda, who represented all that was good and just, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of evil, who sought to bring disorder and destruction. Zoroaster's vision was one of dualism, where every action, thought, and decision was part of this larger cosmic struggle. Zoroaster's rejection of the multitude of gods that were worshipped in Persia at the time was not merely a theological disagreement, it was a profound philosophical shift. In an era when religion was deeply tied to the political and social fabric of society, Zoroaster's teachings challenged the very foundations of Persian religious life. He was not just proposing a new god, he was advocating for a complete reordering of how people understood their relationship to the divine, the world, and each other. In Zoroaster's vision, the divine was not distant or divided into countless gods, but present in all things and unified under one supreme will. This radical monotheism was in stark contrast to the religious pluralism of the time, where various deities and cults vied for followers. The Persian religious landscape included a variety of gods and goddesses, each associated with different elements of nature or human experience. The worship of these gods often involved elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and the veneration of sacred objects. Zoroaster's call for the worship of a single omnipotent god would have seemed like a challenge to the established order. But Zoroaster was not only rejecting the polytheistic traditions of Persia, he was also beginning to formulate a new worldview, one that was deeply concerned with morality, ethics, and human agency. In Zoroaster's teachings, human beings were not mere pawns in the hands of capricious gods. Instead, Zoroaster believed that individuals had the power to choose between good and evil, to align themselves with truth or falsehood, and to act in ways that supported the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. This emphasis on individual choice and responsibility was a key aspect of Zoroastrianism and set it apart from many other religious systems of the time. The revelation also had a profound impact on Zoroaster's understanding of the afterlife. According to Zoroaster, every soul would be judged after death based on their actions during their lifetime. This judgment would determine whether they would be rewarded with eternal life in the presence of Ahura Mazda or condemned to suffering and darkness. This vision of the afterlife, where personal morality had a direct impact on one's fate, was groundbreaking. It placed a heavy emphasis on ethical living, making each person responsible for their own actions and for their place in the cosmic battle between good and evil. Zoroaster's teachings were also influenced by his encounters with other religious and philosophical traditions. The ancient Persian region was a melting pot of ideas, with influences from neighboring cultures such as India, Mesopotamia, and the broader Near East. Zoroaster would have been familiar with the religious practices of these cultures, including the worship of various gods, the veneration of natural forces, and the rituals of sacrifice. However, what set Zoroaster apart from these traditions was his insistence on the singularity and supremacy of Ahura Mazda, as well as his focus on moral choices and ethical responsibility. In particular, Zoroaster's teachings show evidence of the influence of early forms of Indo-Iranian religious thought, which shared a common heritage with Vedic Hinduism. Like the early Vedic traditions, Zoroastrianism emphasized the importance of cosmic order, known as Asha, and the rejection of chaos, Druje. However, Zoroaster took these ideas further by introducing the dualistic framework of Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, positioning the entire universe as a battleground for these opposing forces. Zoroaster's rejection of traditional polytheism and his embrace of monotheism was revolutionary not only in Persia, but also within the broader context of the ancient world. His vision of a singular, supreme God challenged the very nature of religious thought. In the ancient Near East, where other civilizations continued to worship an array of gods, each with their own spheres of influence, Zoroaster proposed a new way of thinking, one that emphasized the unity of the divine and the importance of moral choice. As Zoroaster's teachings began to take shape, he found himself not only confronting the existing religious systems of Persia, but also engaging with the philosophical currents of his time. His emphasis on the struggle between good and evil and the necessity of personal responsibility would later influence a range of philosophical and theological systems, both in Persia and beyond. Over time, Zoroaster's ideas would resonate with the development of monotheistic faiths in the West, particularly Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which would incorporate elements of Zoroastrian thought into their own frameworks of belief. Zoroaster's ideas, though profound and revolutionary, were not immediately embraced by the society he sought to change. In fact, his early years as a prophet were filled with struggle and rejection. The religious landscape of Persia at the time was deeply entrenched in polytheism, where the worship of a multitude of gods was not just a cultural norm, but a vital aspect of daily life. Zoroaster's radical monotheism, his insistence on a single, all-powerful God, was seen as an affront to this deeply ingrained tradition. His rejection of the established pantheon of gods, who had long been worshipped by the Persian people, was not just a theological debate, it was a direct challenge to the very foundation of Persian religious and social structures. For many years, Zoroaster faced significant resistance as he traveled across the Persian Empire, spreading his message. The rejection was not merely intellectual, it was often hostile and violent. His critics saw his teachings as dangerous, subversive, and a threat to the established order. Priests of the traditional gods and those who held power in the polytheistic system viewed Zoroaster as a disruptor of social harmony and political stability. In a world where religious rituals and beliefs were closely tied to royal authority, any deviation from the accepted norms was seen as an existential threat to the status quo. Despite these obstacles, Zoroaster's persistence did not waver. He continued to preach his vision of a singular, supreme God, Ahura Mazda, and the cosmic battle between good and evil. His emphasis on individual moral responsibility, the idea that each person had the ability to choose between truth and falsehood, resonated with a growing number of people, particularly those who were disillusioned with the established religions of the time. Zoroaster's message offered hope, moral clarity, and a path to personal salvation, qualities that began to attract followers even in the face of widespread opposition. One of the most crucial moments in Zoroaster's efforts to spread his teachings came when he encountered King Vishtaspa, the ruler of a region in ancient Persia. Vishtaspa, initially a skeptic of Zoroaster's ideas, would later become his greatest ally and one of the most influential figures in the establishment of Zoroastrianism as the dominant religion of Persia. The relationship between Zoroaster and Vishtaspa would prove to be a pivotal turning point in the history of Zoroastrianism. According to the Zoroastrian texts, Zoroaster initially presented his teachings to King Vishtaspa and his court, but the king was not immediately convinced. The story goes that Vishtaspa had a dream or vision in which he saw the supreme god, Ahura Mazda, urging him to accept Zoroaster's message. This vision was seen as a divine sign, and it prompted Vishtaspa to reconsider his stance on the new faith. Some accounts suggest that Vishtaspa was hesitant at first, but after being convinced of the truth of Zoroaster's teachings, he became a staunch supporter of the prophet. Vishtaspa's conversion to Zoroastrianism was not merely a personal spiritual transformation, it had far-reaching political and social implications. As a powerful ruler, Vishtaspa's decision to endorse Zoroaster's teachings lent them a level of legitimacy and protection that Zoroaster had not previously been afforded. The king's support meant that Zoroaster was able to practice and spread his teachings without fear of persecution. Furthermore, it meant that Zoroastrianism began to gain a foothold among the Persian aristocracy, a group of people who held significant power in society. The king's patronage was crucial in transforming Zoroaster's message from a fringe movement to a religion with political influence. Vishtaspa's endorsement of Zoroaster's monotheism also had a profound impact on the wider Persian Empire. As the king's patronage grew, so too did the reach of Zoroastrianism. Vishtaspa's support allowed Zoroaster to travel throughout the empire, spreading his teachings with newfound authority. The royal backing provided a degree of protection from the hostile forces that had initially resisted Zoroaster's message. With Vishtaspa on his side, Zoroaster was able to establish a more formal structure for his religion, which helped it gain followers not only among the aristocracy, but also among the general populace. The royal patronage extended by King Vishtaspa was a key factor in the eventual establishment of Zoroastrianism as the state religion of Persia. Under the protection of Vishtaspa, Zoroaster's teachings gained traction within the court and among the military elite. As the influence of Zoroastrianism spread, the king and his court began to incorporate Zoroastrian principles into the governance of the empire. The idea of a single, all-powerful God who demanded moral righteousness and truth resonated with the Persian rulers, who saw in Zoroastrianism a way to strengthen their rule and unify their empire under a common religious banner. The role of King Vishtaspa in the rise of Zoroastrianism cannot be overstated. His support transformed Zoroaster from a prophet with a small following into a figure of significant political and religious influence. With the king's backing, Zoroastrianism moved from the margins of Persian society to the very heart of the empire. It was during Vishtaspa's reign that Zoroastrianism began to take on the form that we recognize today, with its emphasis on the worship of Ahura Mazda, the importance of moral choice, and the cosmic battle between good and evil. However, Zoroaster's journey was not without its challenges, even with the king's patronage. Though Vishtaspa provided protection, not all of the Persian nobility or common people were convinced by Zoroaster's message. Many continued to hold on to the traditional polytheistic practices, and the transition to Zoroastrianism was not immediate. It would take time for the religion to gain full acceptance, and Zoroaster himself would face continued opposition from those who viewed his ideas as a threat to their established way of life. Zoroaster's relationship with Vishtaspa also highlights the tension between religious belief and political power. The royal patronage granted by Vishtaspa was instrumental in Zoroastrianism's rise, but it also meant that the religion was closely tied to the Persian monarchy. Over time, the Zoroastrian priesthood would become closely associated with the state, and the political power of the kings would be reinforced by religious legitimacy. This dynamic would have lasting implications for the future of Zoroastrianism, as the religion would become deeply intertwined with the fortunes of the Persian Empire. At the heart of Zoroaster's teachings lies a vision of the world that is governed by fundamental concepts of truth, order, and justice. His religious philosophy, radical for its time, was not just a theological proposition, but a comprehensive worldview that sought to explain the nature of the universe, human existence, and the struggle between good and evil. Zoroaster's ideas would go on to influence not just Persia, but the entire course of religious thought, laying the groundwork for many concepts that would later appear in other religious traditions, including Christianity and Islam. One of the central elements of Zoroastrianism is the concept of Asha, which can be roughly translated as truth, order, or righteousness. Asha represents the divine principle of harmony, justice, and cosmic order, and it is the force that aligns the universe with the will of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god. In contrast to Asha is Druj, meaning lie or falsehood, which represents the forces of chaos, deceit, and disorder. Zoroaster believed that the entire cosmos was caught in a constant struggle between these two opposing forces. Asha, which strives to bring harmony and truth to the world, and Druj, which seeks to sow confusion and destruction. This dualistic vision of the universe, the battle between good and evil, truth and falsehood, is one of the most profound elements of Zoroastrianism. Zoroaster's teachings emphasized that every individual is caught in this cosmic struggle, and that the choices one makes in life directly impact the balance between good and evil. The battle is not fought by gods in the sky, but by human beings in their thoughts, words, and deeds. In Zoroaster's view, human agency and free will were paramount. Individuals are responsible for aligning themselves with the forces of good and contributing to the cosmic order. Zoroaster's idea of Asha was not just an abstract philosophical concept. It had practical, ethical implications for everyday life. The idea that the universe was governed by an underlying order meant that humans had a responsibility to live their lives in a way that mirrored this cosmic harmony. Moral choices, ranging from the smallest personal actions to larger societal decisions, were seen as part of a larger divine plan. Zoroaster taught that by adhering to Asha, individuals could participate in the ongoing struggle against Druj and bring about a world of greater justice, peace, and prosperity. The central tenet of Zoroastrian ethics was the importance of individual choice. In Zoroaster's worldview, each person's actions were not determined by fate or by the will of the gods, but by the choices they made. Zoroaster famously taught that every individual has the power to choose between good and evil, truth and falsehood, and that the consequences of these choices would determine their fate both in this life and in the afterlife. This idea of moral agency is one of the earliest examples of free will in religious thought, and would later influence similar ideas in other religious traditions. Zoroaster's teachings also introduced the concept of judgment after death, a doctrine that would later be adopted by many major world religions. According to Zoroastrian belief, when a person dies, their soul is judged by Ahura Mazda based on the actions they took during their lifetime. This judgment determines whether the soul will be rewarded or punished in the afterlife. The judgment was not simply a matter of divine whim, but was based on the individual's moral choices. Those who followed Asha and lived virtuous lives would be rewarded with eternal life in the presence of Ahura Mazda, while those who aligned themselves with Druj and lived in falsehood would face suffering and torment in a realm of darkness. Zoroaster's vision of judgment after death was closely linked to the idea of resurrection, which also became a key part of his teachings. At the end of time, it was believed that all souls would be resurrected and judged once again. This final judgment would mark the end of the cosmic struggle between good and evil. Those who had lived righteous lives would be granted eternal peace and union with Ahura Mazda, while the forces of evil would be cast into darkness. This eschatological vision of a final divine judgment would later influence the development of similar ideas in both Christianity and Islam. The afterlife in Zoroastrianism was not a place of eternal torment or bliss in the same way that later religious traditions would envision it. Rather, it was a state of spiritual purification, where the soul's worth was determined by its alignment with the cosmic order of Asha. The Zoroastrian concept of the afterlife was therefore closely tied to the idea of moral redemption. Souls could be purified, and their ultimate fate was tied to the moral choices they had made during their lifetimes. In the Zoroastrian worldview, the final judgment and the resurrection of the dead would culminate in a cosmic renewal in which the world would be restored to its original state of purity and harmony. This apocalyptic vision, often referred to as the Frashokereti in Zoroastrian texts, foretold a time when all of creation would be cleansed from the effects of evil and the world would be fully aligned with the divine will of Ahura Mazda. It was a vision of ultimate triumph for good over evil, truth over falsehood, and order over chaos. Zoroaster's teachings also introduced the concept of an eternal struggle between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, the evil spirit. Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, is the embodiment of all that is destructive and corrupt in the world. While Ahura Mazda is the source of all creation, order, and goodness, Angra Mainyu seeks to undo this order, bringing suffering, disease, and disorder to the world. The conflict between these two spirits is not only a cosmic one, but also plays out in the human world, where people's actions either align them with Ahura Mazda or Angra Mainyu. Zoroaster's followers believed that by aligning themselves with the forces of Asha and rejecting Druj, they could help bring about the ultimate defeat of Angra Mainyu and the restoration of cosmic harmony. The influence of Zoroaster's teachings on later religious traditions is profound. His ideas about the afterlife, judgment, resurrection, and the ultimate triumph of good over evil left an indelible mark on the development of both Judaism and Christianity. The concepts of heaven and hell, the final judgment, and the battle between good and evil in Christian theology bear striking similarities to Zoroastrian beliefs. In Islam, Zoroastrianism's dualistic vision of the cosmic struggle between good and evil can also be seen in the battle between the forces of Allah and the forces of Iblis, Satan. Zoroaster's teachings, with their emphasis on individual moral responsibility, the struggle between good and evil, and the ultimate triumph of divine justice, not only laid the foundation for Zoroastrianism, but also had a lasting influence on the development of religious and philosophical thought across the world. His vision of a just and ordered universe, where individuals are held accountable for their choices, continues to resonate with people today, offering a timeless framework for understanding the complexities of morality, ethics, and the nature of the divine. Zoroaster's legacy extends far beyond the foundational years of his teachings. While his ideas initially faced resistance, the prophet's vision eventually became the cornerstone of one of the most influential empires in the ancient world, the Persian Empire. Over time, Zoroastrianism was not only accepted, but institutionalized by the rulers of Persia, particularly under the Achaemenid dynasty. The faith would become the official religion of the Persian state, deeply influencing the empire's culture, governance, military practices, and approach to justice. The adoption of Zoroastrianism by the Achaemenid Empire, which emerged in the 6th century BCE, marked a turning point in the history of the religion. Under the leadership of figures such as King Cyrus the Great and his successors, Zoroastrian principles began to shape the political and social structure of Persia. Though Cyrus himself is often depicted as a tolerant ruler who respected the religious customs of the various peoples he conquered, his reign laid the groundwork for the widespread acceptance of Zoroastrianism throughout the empire. Cyrus's successors, including Darius the Great and Xerxes, embraced Zoroastrianism more fully, institutionalizing it as the state religion. Darius, in particular, was a fervent supporter of Zoroastrian principles, and he is often credited with promoting the faith as part of his broader efforts to consolidate power and unify the empire. The Achaemenid kings not only supported Zoroastrianism in a personal and political sense, but also sought to intertwine the faith with the governance of the empire. The king was seen not only as a political leader, but also as a spiritual guardian of the divine order established by Ahura Mazda. This dual role helped reinforce the legitimacy of the monarchy, as the king's authority was seen as being directly tied to the will of the supreme god. Zoroastrianism's integration into Persian law and governance was significant in shaping the empire's political system. The moral and ethical principles espoused by Zoroaster, such as truth, justice, and the responsibility of the individual to make righteous choices, were embedded into Persian legal frameworks. Zoroastrianism helped establish a sense of cosmic justice, which was reflected in the legal and judicial practices of the empire. Persian rulers, following Zoroaster's teachings, saw themselves as enforcers of divine justice, ensuring that truth and righteousness prevailed within their realm. In Persian society, the role of the king as both a political and religious figure was reinforced by the centrality of Zoroastrian beliefs. Persian law was closely intertwined with religious principles, which meant that laws were not merely human constructs, but reflections of divine will. The concept of Asha, or truth, was foundational to the Persian approach to justice. Persian judges and magistrates were expected to uphold the divine order of Ahura Mazda, ensuring that fairness and truth prevailed in the courtrooms and in the conduct of everyday affairs. Corruption and deceit were seen not just as political failings, but as violations of the divine law. Zoroastrian principles also permeated the military practices of the Persian Empire. The notion of cosmic struggle between good and evil was reflected in the way the Persians viewed war and conflict. The Persian army, under the influence of Zoroastrianism, was not simply engaged in conquest for material gain. It was seen as a righteous battle between the forces of order and chaos, truth and falsehood. Soldiers were often motivated by the belief that their actions were part of a divine plan, and that they were fighting to uphold the cosmic order as decreed by Ahura Mazda. The Persian military also incorporated Zoroastrian rituals and symbols into their practices, reinforcing the spiritual significance of warfare. In addition to its impact on Persian governance and military life, Zoroastrianism shaped the culture and daily life of the Persian Empire. Zoroastrian rituals, such as the maintenance of sacred fire altars, became an integral part of Persian religious practice. Temples dedicated to Ahura Mazda were built throughout the empire, and the sacred fire became a symbol of the divine presence. Fire worship, though not the worship of fire itself, was central to Zoroastrianism, symbolizing purity, light, and the divine order. It was believed that the sacred fire, which could only be tended by priests, had the power to purify both the body and the soul. Zoroastrianism also had a profound influence on the Persian Empire's approach to diplomacy and foreign policy. The concept of truth and justice in Zoroastrianism extended beyond the borders of Persia, shaping how the empire engaged with neighboring states and peoples. Persian kings, drawing on Zoroastrian ideals, often promoted peace and mutual respect with other civilizations. The idea of truth, as embodied in Asha, was central to Persian diplomacy. The Persians were known for their tolerance toward conquered peoples, allowing them to maintain their religious practices and customs as long as they acknowledged the supremacy of the Persian king. This policy of religious tolerance was in stark contrast to the more aggressive religious policies of other empires at the time, such as the Assyrians. Zoroastrianism's influence extended well beyond the Persian Empire. As one of the most powerful and enduring empires of the ancient world, Persia played a key role in the transmission of Zoroastrian ideas to other regions. Zoroastrianism would have a lasting impact on the religious and philosophical traditions of the ancient Near East, influencing the development of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The concept of a singular omnipotent God, the judgment of souls after death, the battle between good and evil, and the idea of an ultimate divine victory over chaos are all themes that would later appear in these major world religions. One of the most significant ways Zoroastrianism influenced other religious traditions was through its concept of dualism, the cosmic struggle between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. This dualistic worldview, where the forces of good and evil are in constant conflict, became a key element in the development of later religious thought, particularly in the Abrahamic faiths. In Christianity, for example, the concept of Satan as the embodiment of evil and the eventual triumph of good in the final judgment closely parallels Zoroastrian ideas. Similarly, the Jewish tradition's development of a more defined notion of a singular, all-powerful God, especially during the time of the Babylonian exile, reflects the influence of Zoroastrian monotheism. The early Islamic period also saw Zoroastrianism's influence, especially in the way it shaped Islamic concepts of the afterlife, divine judgment, and the moral struggle between good and evil. Some scholars believe that elements of Zoroastrian thought, such as the belief in an eternal struggle between good and evil, were absorbed into Islamic eschatology as the Persian Empire came into contact with the Arab conquerors during the rise of Islam. Zoroastrianism's influence was not confined solely to religious ideas. It also contributed to broader philosophical and ethical systems. The Persian Empire, as a major center of learning, was instrumental in transmitting Zoroastrian ideas to neighboring cultures, and Persian scholars played a key role in preserving ancient knowledge during the early centuries of the Common Era. Through the Achaemenid dynasty and its successors, Zoroastrianism became deeply embedded in the cultural fabric of the Persian Empire, shaping everything from the military to the legal system and influencing neighboring civilizations. The Persian Empire's ability to integrate Zoroastrianism into its political, social, and military systems helped to establish the religion as one of the most enduring and influential belief systems of the ancient world. Despite its significant rise to prominence under the Achaemenid Empire, Zoroastrianism faced substantial challenges in the centuries following Zoroaster's death. The empire that had been the cradle of this monotheistic faith would eventually crumble, and with it, the status of Zoroastrianism would decline. The fall of the Achaemenid dynasty marked the beginning of a period of great upheaval for the Persian Empire. New forces would sweep through the region, bringing with them new religious and cultural influences that would threaten the continued existence of Zoroastrianism. Among these forces, none were as impactful as the rise of Alexander the Great. In the 4th century BCE, Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, embarked on a series of conquests that would reshape the ancient world. His military campaigns extended as far as Egypt, India and beyond, and in 330 BCE, Alexander conquered the Persian Empire, defeating the Achaemenid king Darius III. With the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, the political and religious landscape of Persia was fundamentally altered. For Zoroastrianism, this conquest represented a profound crisis. Alexander's military success was not just a political victory, it was also a cultural and religious upheaval. Alexander's vision for the empire he sought to build was rooted in Hellenistic ideals. His conquest of Persia brought with it a wave of Greek influence, as Greek culture, language, and philosophy began to take root throughout the region. This period, known as the Hellenistic era, saw the spread of Greek thought and the blending of Greek and Persian traditions. However, this cultural fusion often came at the expense of the indigenous religious practices of Persia, including Zoroastrianism. One of the most significant blows to Zoroastrianism during Alexander's conquests was the destruction of Zoroastrian temples and religious centers. As Alexander's armies moved through Persia, they systematically dismantled the infrastructure of the Achaemenid Empire, including its sacred sites. Zoroastrian fire temples, which had been central to the religious life of the empire, were looted or destroyed, and the sacred fires that had burned in these temples were extinguished. This cultural destruction was not merely the result of military conquest, it was also a reflection of the ideological clash between the Greek worldview and the ancient Persian religious tradition. The Hellenistic influence under Alexander sought to replace local customs and practices with Greek gods, philosophies, and ways of life. Despite this devastation, Zoroastrianism was not entirely wiped out. The religion, deeply rooted in the cultural fabric of Persia, managed to survive the turbulent period following Alexander's conquest. Though the Achaemenid Empire had fallen, the Persian people and their religious practices did not disappear. The religious heart of Persia shifted in the wake of Alexander's invasion, but Zoroastrianism persisted, albeit in a weakened state. The survival of Zoroastrianism can be traced to the resilience of its followers, as well as the shifts in Persian power that occurred after Alexander's death. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire ushered in a period of political instability, but a new Persian power would rise to take its place: the Parthian Empire. The Parthians, who ruled Persia from the mid-3rd century BCE to the early 3rd century CE, adopted Zoroastrianism as the state religion and began to restore the religious traditions that had been disrupted by Alexander's conquests. The Parthian period, while not without its challenges, marked the beginning of a revival of Zoroastrianism. The Parthian rulers saw the faith as a unifying force, one that could help consolidate their rule over a vast and diverse empire. Under the Parthians, Zoroastrianism was once again recognized as a central aspect of Persian identity, and the faith began to reassert its influence over the region. Zoroastrian fire temples were rebuilt, and the clergy were reinstated as important figures in the empire's governance. While the Parthians did not make Zoroastrianism the state religion to the same extent as the Achaemenids had, they ensured its survival and laid the groundwork for its resurgence. The true revival of Zoroastrianism, however, came under the Sasanian Empire, which arose in the 3rd century CE and would go on to rule Persia for the next 4 centuries. The Sasanian dynasty, founded by Ardashir I, was deeply committed to the restoration of the old Achaemenid traditions, including the promotion of Zoroastrianism. Ardashir in particular saw Zoroastrianism as a means of legitimizing his rule and asserting the cultural and religious identity of Persia in the face of external threats. Under the Sasanian dynasty, Zoroastrianism was firmly established as the state religion. The Sasanian rulers not only supported Zoroastrianism in a personal and political sense, but also made it a key pillar of their empire's ideology. Zoroastrianism became the official religion of the state, and the king was seen as the divine representative of Ahura Mazda on earth. The Sasanian kings, such as Shapur and Khosrow, worked to institutionalize Zoroastrianism, giving it an official status and role in governance. They also played a central role in reviving Zoroastrian religious institutions, including the fire temples and the priesthood. The Sasanian kings took further steps to ensure the dominance of Zoroastrianism in Persian society. They standardized the religious texts, most notably the Avesta, the sacred scriptures of Zoroastrianism, which had been in danger of being lost during the period of Hellenistic influence. The priesthood was restructured, and new educational systems were put in place to train future generations of priests. Zoroastrianism became deeply intertwined with the political and social life of the empire. The Sasanian kings used the religion not only to legitimize their rule, but also to promote a sense of unity and national identity among the Persian people. Zoroastrianism's re-establishment as the state religion under the Sasanians had far-reaching consequences for Persian society. The influence of Zoroastrian teachings permeated various aspects of daily life, from law and governance to cultural practices and art. Zoroastrian principles, particularly those related to justice, truth, and cosmic order, played a key role in shaping the Sasanian approach to governance and diplomacy. The empire was ruled with a sense of divine order, and the king's role as the protector of Zoroastrian law was central to his authority. The Sasanian Empire's patronage of Zoroastrianism also had lasting consequences beyond the borders of Persia. As the Sasanian Empire reached its peak, it became one of the most powerful empires in the ancient world. Its influence spread to neighboring regions, including Mesopotamia, the Arabian Peninsula, and Central Asia. Zoroastrianism's impact was felt not only in Persia, but also in the surrounding regions, where it influenced the development of other religious and philosophical systems, including the early stages of Christianity and Islam. Though Zoroastrianism faced great challenges after the fall of the Achaemenid Empire, the faith ultimately endured. It survived through the resilience of its followers, the support of the Parthian and Sasanian empires, and the unyielding desire to preserve Persia's ancient traditions. The Sasanian dynasty in particular played a crucial role in reviving Zoroastrianism and cementing its place as the state religion of Persia. As a result, Zoroastrianism remained a central force in Persian culture and governance for centuries, and its influence continued to be felt long after the fall of the Sasanian Empire. The rise of Islam in the 7th century CE marked one of the most pivotal moments in the history of Zoroastrianism. The Arab conquest of Persia not only brought an end to the Sasanian Empire, but also led to a profound shift in the religious and cultural landscape of the region. For the Zoroastrian community, the arrival of Islam was a turning point that would challenge their existence, their faith, and their place in the Persian world. As the Muslim forces spread across Persia, Zoroastrians faced persecution, social displacement, and the gradual erosion of their religious influence. Many Zoroastrians converted to Islam in order to survive in the new political and social order, while others sought refuge in far-off lands, most notably in India. The Islamic conquest of Persia, which began in the mid-7th century under the leadership of the Rashidun Caliphate, was swift and decisive. Following the Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 CE, the Persians were defeated, and within a few decades, the once mighty Sasanian Empire was no more. The Arab invaders, driven by their religious fervor and military conquest, brought with them the teachings of Islam, which quickly spread throughout the region. As Islam became the dominant force in the Middle East and Persia, Zoroastrianism, along with other pre-Islamic religions, was pushed to the margins. Under Islamic rule, Zoroastrians were considered dhimmis or protected people, but this status came with restrictions. While the Islamic caliphates granted some degree of religious tolerance to non-Muslims, this tolerance was often accompanied by social and economic disadvantages. Zoroastrians, along with Jews and Christians, were required to pay a special tax, known as the jizya, in exchange for protection. This tax was a burden on many Zoroastrians, as it was seen as a form of subjugation that reinforced their inferior status in the new Islamic society. In addition to the financial burden, Zoroastrians faced cultural and social pressure to convert to Islam. The new Islamic rulers and their growing Muslim population often viewed Zoroastrians as people of the book, acknowledging their monotheistic faith, but also considering them to be part of the old, fading religious order. As Islam expanded, Zoroastrians were increasingly marginalized in both religious and political spheres. While they were allowed to practice their religion to some extent, it was clear that the future of Zoroastrianism in Persia was uncertain. The process of conversion was gradual, but over the centuries a significant number of Zoroastrians chose to embrace Islam. The reasons for conversion were varied. Some Zoroastrians were attracted to the social and political advantages that came with being Muslim in an Islamic empire. Conversion allowed individuals to avoid the stigmas associated with being a dhimmi and to integrate into the rapidly growing Muslim society. Others, however, were coerced or forced into conversion through various means, including the threat of violence, economic hardships, and the pressure to conform to the new religious order. For many Zoroastrians, conversion was not merely a religious choice, it was a matter of survival. As the power of the Islamic caliphates grew, the political and social structure of Persia shifted, and those who held on to their ancient faith were increasingly isolated. The once prominent Zoroastrian communities, which had enjoyed the protection and favor of the Sasanian monarchy, found themselves struggling to maintain their traditions in the face of overwhelming pressure from the Muslim population. Despite this wave of conversion, Zoroastrianism did not vanish entirely from Persia. Many Zoroastrians continued to practice their faith in secret, maintaining their religious practices and traditions in the face of adversity. However, these communities became smaller and more isolated over time as they were increasingly assimilated into the larger Muslim society. The decline of Zoroastrianism in its homeland was a gradual process as the once vibrant faith dwindled in numbers and influence. As the Islamic conquest unfolded and the Zoroastrian community in Persia faced growing persecution and loss of status, many Zoroastrians made the difficult decision to flee their homeland in search of safety and religious freedom. The most significant migration took place to India, where a small group of Zoroastrians, known as the Parsis, established a new community. According to tradition, the Parsi fled to India in the 8th century, following the fall of the Sasanian Empire and the rise of Islamic rule. Their migration was driven by the desire to preserve their faith and identity in a land where religious freedom was more readily available. Upon their arrival in India, the Parsis found a welcoming environment in the western coastal region of Gujarat. The local rulers, including the Hindu Rajputs, offered the Parsis refuge and allowed them to practice their religion freely. The Parsis settled in India, maintaining their Zoroastrian traditions while also adapting to the new cultural and social environment. Over time, the Parsi community flourished, and they became an integral part of Indian society, contributing significantly to the country's economy, culture, and industry. The Parsis played an important role in India's modernization during the British colonial period, particularly in trade, business, and the arts. The Parsis, despite being far removed from their Persian homeland, managed to preserve the core aspects of Zoroastrianism. They built fire temples, maintained their sacred texts, and continued to follow the teachings of Zoroaster. The Parsi community also played a key role in maintaining the Zoroastrian priesthood, ensuring that the rituals and sacred practices of the religion were passed down through generations. The Parsis have managed to preserve a rich cultural heritage, despite the challenges they faced in India and the centuries of adversity their faith endured in Persia. While Zoroastrianism in Persia continued to decline, the Parsi community in India remained one of the few strongholds of the faith. However, even in India, the Parsis faced challenges. The community was relatively small, and over time their numbers began to dwindle due to low birth rates and emigration. Nevertheless, the Parsi community has continued to make significant contributions to India's development and remains an important symbol of the resilience of Zoroastrianism in the modern world. The challenges faced by Zoroastrians during the rise of Islam were immense, but the faith managed to survive through the perseverance of its followers, the migration of Zoroastrians to India, and the preservation of their traditions in the face of overwhelming adversity. The Parsis, in particular, played a crucial role in ensuring that Zoroastrianism did not vanish completely, and they remain a testament to the enduring legacy of Zoroaster and his teachings. In the centuries following the Islamic conquest, Zoroastrianism's presence in Persia was severely diminished, but it continued to thrive in other parts of the world, particularly in India. The Zoroastrian faith, though largely displaced in its homeland, found new life in the diaspora, and the Parsi community remains a vibrant and active force, carrying on the traditions of the ancient Persian faith. In the modern era, a remarkable revival of interest in Zoroastrianism has taken place. Despite centuries of decline and displacement, Zoroaster's teachings are once again being recognized and studied, particularly by scholars and historians who have come to understand the profound influence of Zoroastrianism on the development of other world religions. As academic interest in ancient religions has grown, so too has the recognition of Zoroastrianism's pivotal role in shaping religious thought across the globe. This renewed interest in Zoroaster's philosophy and the rediscovery of ancient Zoroastrian texts have contributed to a resurgence of both scholarly and public interest in this ancient faith. One of the key factors in this revival has been the rediscovery of Zoroastrian religious texts. The Avesta, the sacred scriptures of Zoroastrianism, had long been neglected or forgotten in the Western world, particularly after the decline of the Sasanian Empire and the rise of Islam in Persia. While Zoroastrians continued to preserve their sacred texts in Persia and India, much of the world was unaware of their significance. However, the 19th and 20th centuries saw a surge in the study of ancient languages and religious traditions, including the rediscovery and translation of the Avesta. Scholars began to study these ancient texts with renewed interest, recognizing their importance not only to Zoroastrianism, but also to the broader history of religious thought. The rediscovery of Zoroastrian writings, particularly in the context of the rise of comparative religion as an academic discipline, allowed scholars to see the connections between Zoroastrianism and other major world religions. The shared themes of monotheism, cosmic dualism, the afterlife, and the battle between good and evil, all of which are central to Zoroastrian teachings, were found to have influenced the religious thought of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As these connections became more apparent, the importance of Zoroastrianism in the history of world religions gained wider recognition. The study of Zoroastrianism has also been enriched by the excavation of ancient Persian sites and the study of archaeological finds. As scholars have uncovered the remnants of Zoroastrian temples, inscriptions, and artifacts, they have gained a deeper understanding of how Zoroastrianism functioned as both a religious and cultural force in the ancient world. These discoveries have provided valuable insights into the way Zoroastrianism shaped the daily lives of its followers and the broader Persian Empire. They have also helped to reconstruct the historical context in which Zoroastrianism developed, allowing modern scholars to better understand its lasting impact on the region and beyond. In addition to the academic revival of Zoroastrianism, the religion has seen a resurgence in public interest, as people have become more interested in ancient religious traditions and their influence on modern religious thought. Zoroastrianism has attracted a new generation of followers, scholars, and practitioners. The internet and digital media have played a key role in making Zoroastrianism more accessible to a global audience. Online platforms, including forums, websites, and social media groups, have allowed people from diverse backgrounds to learn about Zoroastrianism and connect with others who share an interest in the faith. The resurgence of interest in Zoroastrianism has also been fueled by the increasing recognition of the cultural and religious contributions of Zoroastrian communities, particularly those in India and Iran. The Parsi community in India, which traces its roots to the migration of Zoroastrians from Persia centuries ago, has been instrumental in preserving and promoting the teachings of Zoroaster. Despite the challenges faced by the Parsi community in modern times, including low birth rates and emigration, the community remains an active force in Indian society, contributing to its culture, economy, and political life. The Parsis have made significant contributions to the development of modern India, particularly in the fields of industry, commerce, and the arts. Prominent Parsis, such as industrialist J.R.D. Tata, philanthropist Dadabhai Nauroji, and social reformer Behramji Malabari, have played key roles in shaping India's history. The Parsi community has maintained a strong sense of cultural identity, and Zoroastrian rituals, customs, and festivals remain an important part of their daily lives. In India, Zoroastrianism has flourished as a minority religion, with many Parsis still practicing traditional Zoroastrian ceremonies, such as the worship of the sacred fire and the observance of the Nowruz, Persian New Year festival. However, the Parsi community in India, like Zoroastrian communities worldwide, faces challenges in the modern world. The community has experienced a decline in numbers, primarily due to low fertility rates and the difficulty of maintaining cultural identity in a rapidly changing society. As a result, the Parsi population has become increasingly smaller, and efforts have been made to preserve both their religious traditions and their cultural heritage. Parsi leaders and scholars have worked to ensure that the teachings of Zoroaster continue to be passed down to future generations through education, cultural programs, and community initiatives. In Iran, where Zoroastrianism once flourished as the state religion under the Achaemenid and Sasanian empires, the faith has endured despite significant challenges. Following the Islamic conquest of Persia, Zoroastrians in Iran faced centuries of persecution, but the community has managed to survive. Today, Iran is home to one of the oldest continuous Zoroastrian communities in the world, though their numbers are much smaller than in the past. Despite the political and social difficulties faced by the Zoroastrian community in post-revolutionary Iran, Zoroastrians continue to practice their faith and preserve their traditions, particularly in the region of Yazd, where many of the country's Zoroastrian fire temples are located. The Zoroastrian community in Iran has maintained a strong sense of cultural and religious identity, and while it is a minority, its influence can still be felt in Iranian society. Zoroastrians in Iran continue to celebrate important religious festivals such as Nowruz and the Zoroastrian feast of Sadeh, which marks the midwinter celebration of fire. Zoroastrians in Iran also work to ensure that their heritage is preserved for future generations, with a focus on education, community involvement, and the protection of religious sites. The modern revival of interest in Zoroastrianism is not just academic or cultural, it is also spiritual. Around the world, people are rediscovering the ancient teachings of Zoroaster and finding resonance in the religion's emphasis on truth, justice, and the cosmic struggle between good and evil. The Zoroastrian faith's focus on individual moral, responsibility and its vision of a divine cosmic order continue to appeal to those seeking a deeper understanding of the universe and humanity's role within it. The religion's ancient wisdom offers timeless insights into the human condition, addressing questions of morality, ethics, and the nature of divine justice. Today, Zoroastrian communities around the world are actively engaged in preserving their religious traditions and adapting them to the modern world. Through the efforts of scholars, religious leaders, and community members, Zoroastrianism is experiencing a quiet but important renaissance. As the world becomes more interconnected and people turn to ancient wisdom for guidance, Zoroastrianism is poised to play an increasingly important role in the global conversation about religion, ethics, and the future of humanity. Zoroaster's teachings have left an indelible mark on the world, not only during his time, but also in the centuries that followed. Although Zoroastrianism no longer holds the same prominence as it once did, the enduring legacy of Zoroaster's philosophical and ethical ideas continues to shape and influence the world's major religions, modern thought, and global ethics. The core principles of Zoroastrianism, such as the concepts of free will, the cosmic battle between good and evil, and the afterlife, have resonated through the ages, making their way into Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and even modern philosophical discourse. In this final part, we will explore the lasting impact of Zoroaster's vision and how it continues to inspire people around the globe, both within and outside of the Zoroastrian community. One of the most significant aspects of Zoroaster's legacy is his emphasis on the moral and philosophical battle between good and evil. Zoroastrianism introduced a dualistic view of the cosmos that placed Ahura Mazda, the god of light, truth, and order, against Angra Mainyu, the spirit of darkness, deceit, and chaos. This eternal struggle between the forces of good and evil became one of the central tenets of Zoroastrian thought, and its influence can be seen in many other religious traditions. The concept of an ongoing cosmic battle between good and evil is especially prominent in the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In Judaism, the development of the idea of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, as well as the anticipation of a messianic age when evil will be vanquished, mirrors Zoroastrian dualism. It is no coincidence that these concepts began to take shape in the period following the Babylonian exile, which coincided with the time when the Persian Empire, under Cyrus the Great, was at its height, and Zoroastrian ideas were likely influencing Jewish religious thought. The figure of Satan in Judaism, later developed into a central antagonist in Christianity and Islam, is also a reflection of Zoroastrianism's dualistic vision, where an evil being separate from God embodies the forces of darkness. Christianity, with its apocalyptic vision of a final judgment where good triumphs over evil, also draws heavily from Zoroastrian ideas. The Book of Revelation, with its vivid imagery of cosmic warfare, the battle between angels and demons, and the eventual establishment of a divine kingdom, echoes the Zoroastrian vision of the final victory of Ahura Mazda over Angra Mainyu. The concept of an eternal struggle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, is one of the most enduring legacies of Zoroastrian thought in Christian theology. Similarly, in Islam, the idea of a final judgment and the ultimate triumph of good over evil is closely tied to Zoroastrian dualism. The Islamic concept of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Day of Judgment, where each soul will be judged based on their deeds, has echoes of Zoroastrian teachings about individual judgment after death and the cosmic battle between good and evil. The role of Satan in Islam, as a rebellious being who seeks to lead people astray, is also a concept with roots in Zoroastrian thought, where Angra Mainyu is seen as the source of all deceit and evil. Beyond its influence on the major world religions, Zoroastrianism's ethical teachings continue to shape modern thought, particularly in the fields of ethics and cosmology. Zoroaster's emphasis on individual responsibility and the importance of choosing between good and evil resonates with contemporary discussions of free will and moral agency. Zoroastrianism teaches that each person has the power to choose between Asha, truth, order, and Druj, falsehood, chaos, and that every action, no matter how small, contributes to the cosmic struggle between good and evil. This idea of moral responsibility, where individuals are held accountable for their actions, aligns with modern ethical theories that emphasize personal autonomy and the importance of moral decision-making. In terms of cosmology, Zoroaster's vision of a just and ordered world continues to inspire people who seek to understand the universe in both spiritual and scientific terms. Zoroastrianism presents a cosmos that is divinely ordered, where Ahura Mazda created the world in harmony and with purpose. This idea of a purposeful, orderly universe resonates with modern cosmological theories, particularly those that explore the idea of a finely tuned universe. The belief that there is a divine intelligence behind the workings of the cosmos echoes modern scientific discussions about the nature of the universe and its origins. Zoroaster's vision of a just world, where truth and order prevail, has also had a lasting impact on the development of modern law and justice. Zoroastrian teachings on justice, particularly the idea that every individual will be judged based on their deeds, laid the groundwork for later legal concepts, such as the notion of divine justice and moral law. This vision of a universe governed by moral principles has influenced the development of legal systems in both the ancient and modern worlds. Many of the moral concepts that are central to Western legal traditions, such as the idea of individual rights, personal responsibility, and the importance of justice, can trace their origins back to Zoroastrian ideas about Asher and Druj. In the modern world, Zoroastrianism's ethical teachings continue to be relevant in addressing contemporary moral dilemmas. The religion's emphasis on truth, justice, and the cosmic battle between good and evil provides a framework for understanding ethical decision-making in an age of global challenges. The Zoroastrian principle of Asher calls on individuals and societies to live according to the highest moral standards, and its message of the importance of truth and righteousness in the face of adversity is a powerful one in today's world. Zoroaster's vision of a just and orderly world, governed by divine principles of truth and justice, continues to resonate with people around the world, both religious and secular. His teachings have had a lasting impact on the development of major world religions, modern ethical thought, and the quest to understand the cosmos. The enduring relevance of Zoroastrianism is a testament to the timeless nature of Zoroaster's philosophy, which continues to inspire people in their search for meaning, morality, and cosmic order. While Zoroastrianism may no longer be a major world religion in terms of its number of followers, its philosophical and ethical legacy is far-reaching. The ideas Zoroaster introduced about the nature of good and evil, the importance of moral responsibility, and the vision of a just and ordered world continue to shape the spiritual, ethical, and intellectual life of humanity. Whether through the major world religions that grew out of the soil of his teachings or through modern philosophical thought that grapples with questions of ethics and cosmology, Zoroaster's influence remains a guiding light for many. The story of Zoroaster is not one that belongs solely to the ancient past. His teachings and the religion he founded continue to exert influence in ways both seen and unseen in the modern world. Despite the decline of Zoroastrianism as a major religion, Zoroaster's ideas about good and evil, truth, justice, and the cosmic order have had an enduring legacy, shaping religious, philosophical, and cultural thought throughout the centuries. Today, the global influence of Zoroastrianism is felt not only in the realms of faith and ethics, but also in art, literature, governance, and the broader cultural landscape. In this final section, we will take a closer look at how Zoroastrianism continues to impact the world today through its philosophical principles, the resilience of Zoroastrian communities, and their cultural contributions. One of the most remarkable aspects of Zoroastrianism's influence is the way its philosophical principles continue to shape modern ethical frameworks. Zoroaster's teachings introduced a vision of the world where the battle between good and evil, embodied by the forces of Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, plays out not only in the cosmos but in the moral choices of each individual. This fundamental dualism, where humanity has the responsibility to choose between truth, Asher, and falsehood, Druj, has had a profound impact on the development of ethics, both in religious traditions and in secular philosophy. The Zoroastrian concept of moral choice, emphasizing personal responsibility and individual accountability, found resonance in the ethical teachings of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which emphasize the importance of human free will and the responsibility of individuals to act in accordance with divine or moral law. This emphasis on individual moral agency also resonates with contemporary ethical thought, particularly in the context of discussions around autonomy, justice, and human rights. The modern belief in personal responsibility, along with the idea that each individual's actions contribute to the greater good or evil in the world, can trace its roots back to Zoroastrianism's vision of the moral struggle between light and darkness. Moreover, Zoroaster's teachings laid the foundation for many of the ideas that would later influence Western legal systems. His vision of a cosmic order where truth and justice triumph over chaos and falsehood has echoes in the philosophical foundations of modern law, particularly the notion of justice as an inherent and divine principle. Zoroastrianism's emphasis on truth, righteousness, and justice can be seen as an early precursor to the development of the moral and legal concepts that underpin modern societies. In this sense, Zoroaster's vision of a just and ordered world continues to be an important source of inspiration for those who work to promote human dignity, equality, and justice in contemporary societies. In addition to its influence on ethics, Zoroastrianism has made significant cultural contributions that continue to shape the world today. Though the number of Zoroastrians in the world is relatively small, particularly after centuries of decline in their ancestral homeland of Persia, their impact on global culture is disproportionate to their numbers. The Zoroastrian community has made notable contributions in a wide range of fields, including art, literature, governance, and even science. Their cultural resilience in the face of adversity is a testament to the lasting power of Zoroastrian traditions, which continue to thrive in small pockets across the globe, particularly in India, Iran, and the diaspora. The Parsis, descendants of Zoroastrian refugees who migrated to India after the Islamic conquest of Persia, have been particularly influential in the cultural life of India. Despite being a minority, the Parsi community has had a profound impact on the country's economic, political, and cultural landscape. The Parsis were instrumental in the development of modern Indian industry, with figures such as J.R.D. Tata, the industrialist and philanthropist, playing a key role in shaping India's post-colonial economic growth. Other prominent Parsis, such as Dadabhai Nauroji, a pioneering Indian nationalist and the first Asian to be elected to the British Parliament, and the social reformer Behramji Malabari, made significant contributions to India's intellectual and political development. The Parsi community's contributions to literature, art, and architecture have also left a lasting legacy. Parsi writers and poets, including the renowned author Rohinton Mistry, have made important contributions to Indian literature, while Parsi architects and artists have helped shape the aesthetic and cultural heritage of the country. The Parsis' ability to maintain their Zoroastrian faith while also integrating into the fabric of Indian society is a testament to the enduring strength of their cultural identity. In Iran, Zoroastrians, though a minority, have also continued to make cultural contributions, particularly in the preservation of Zoroastrian heritage. Iran is home to a small but resilient Zoroastrian community, primarily concentrated in the cities of Yazd and Kerman, where fire, temples, and ancient monuments still stand as symbols of Zoroastrian faith and culture. Zoroastrianism's influence on Iranian art, literature, and architecture remains evident in the country's cultural heritage. Moreover, Zoroastrianism's ethical teachings about truth, justice, and the cosmic struggle continue to influence Iranian intellectual thought, even in the context of a predominantly Muslim society. Zoroastrianism's contributions to governance are also significant. In the ancient world, the Persian Empire, under the Achaemenid and Sasanian dynasties, was one of the first to establish legal codes that emphasized justice, moral responsibility, and the protection of individuals' rights. Zoroastrian principles of fairness, social responsibility, and moral integrity helped shape the legal traditions of Persia, and these principles would later influence the governance systems of other cultures. The idea of a just ruler who is morally accountable to the divine order, an idea central to Zoroastrianism, has continued to resonate in political thought throughout history. The resilience of the Zoroastrian communities, both in Iran and India, serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring strength of Zoroastrianism in the face of adversity. Though their numbers have dwindled over time, The impact of Zoroastrians on global culture and thought is undeniable. Their ability to preserve their faith and culture over millennia, through periods of political upheaval, persecution, and migration, demonstrates the enduring power of their beliefs and traditions. Zoroaster's vision of a just and orderly world, governed by the principles of truth, justice, and moral responsibility, continues to inspire people around the globe. Whether through the ethical teachings that shape the world's major religions, the cultural contributions of the Zoroastrian community, or the resilience of Zoroastrians in the modern world, Zoroaster's legacy endures. The story of Zoroaster, though ancient, is one that transcends time and place, reminding us of the profound power of ideas to shape the world and inspire future generations. As we reflect on the lasting impact of Zoroaster's teachings, it is clear that his vision of a world governed by truth, justice, and moral order continues to resonate deeply in the modern era. Whether through the influence of Zoroastrian ideas on other world religions, the philosophical foundations of modern ethics, or the cultural contributions of the Zoroastrian community, the story of Zoroaster is far from over. It is a story that continues to inspire and shape the world today, proving that the power of ideas is timeless.